Hey everybody, Tony D and Little Joan here. Little Joan, you sleeping? You sleeping? Here with a hot take, a historic hot take, I guess you would call it, on the history of slavery. Because I've gotten so much flack in my comment section about talking about a movie, and I've seen so many people when I point out, everybody has an ancestor who was a slave. They go, "What? That's not true." All right, here's Wikipedia. And the reason I use Wikipedia is not because it's particularly accurate, but for stuff like this, it's okay. It's short, punchy, you know, bits of information. It's generally true because generally this wasn't an issue in the world if you had a fourth grade education. The problem, of course, is if you go on Google or some of the internet and you type in history of slavery, it instantly gives you hundreds and hundreds of places that tell you about the history of slavery just in America. there is an there is a focus on slavery in America, probably because it's more recent, and that's where it ended. Allegedly, it really hasn't ended. There's still other places when society breaks down, and there's still like a civilization, but like in Libya, they got slaves in Libya. They're buying and selling people in Libya. So for all of you who are, you know, self-righteous warriors who get into YouTube comments and say, "Oh, you don't know anything about slavery," what are you doing here? Why aren't you out there protesting in front of the Libyan embassy and saying, "Why are there slaves in Libya? Why are we why do we have a relationship with Libya? Why aren't we pressuring Libya to abolish slavery?" None of these people do that because they're just ignorant. They're just dumb. Not most of you watching the video, but the ones that comment, they watch 10 minutes of the video or 2 minutes. They get mad and they just type something. But I just want to go over sort of the basic history here, and Wikipedia has it. You could look at the entry before somebody F's it up, but slavery occurs relatively rarely amongst hunter and gatherer populations, according to Wikipedia, because it develops under conditions of social stratification. Slavery operated in the first civilizations, such as Sumer in Mesopotamia, which dates back as far as 3,500 BC. Slavery features in the Code of Hammurabi, 1860 BCE, which refers to an established institution. All right, and if you go down here, they've got some pictures, which is always helpful. Here are some slaves in chains during the Roman rule in Smyrna, present-day Izmir, in 200 CE. 1480 BC, fugitive slave treaty between Idramini of Alaka. Now, wow, I don't know these places. I have no idea where these places are, but they're mostly in Africa, in the Middle East. That's where the cradle of civilization begun, because that's where humans started. Humans evolved probably out of the middle of Africa somewhere. And we're all related to that. I have no problem saying that. And here's a little map of where all the slavery happened in Africa. A lot of it happened in Egypt. They have Egypt. Let's see if I can make the map bigger. Yeah. So you got Egypt up here. You've got all along the coast up here on the Mediterranean in northern Africa, because that was tied into the Romans and Carthage. You got stuff going on here in the 13th century. The Ghana Empire. Is that how you pronounce that? Ghana. You got Mogadishu down here. I mean, all over the place. All over the place. Greater Zimbabwe. Main slave trade routes in the Middle Ages. All over the place. So, no one's immune to this. The Middle East, they were notorious for their slave trade. They treated their slaves horrifically. They castrated all the men, all of them. Imagine that. The Romans had slaves, but it was more of a, when they did it, you could, your master could free you, could give you money. Someone could buy your freedom. But if you were in the Middle East buying your freedom, well, it's a little too late for that now. Here you have it, amongst indigenous people, Aztec slavery amongst indigenous people in America. You have Brazil, the British and French Caribbean, Canada. Ooh, what about the slaves there? Latin America, United States, of course, Middle East. Oh, ISIL had slave trade. Look at that. That's pretty recent. Tons of Asian slave trade. Ancient India, ancient China, Indian subcontinent in the Middle Ages. Here's the modern era. Oh, Iran? I did not know that. Reginald Dyer, recalling operations against tribes in Iranian Baluchistan in 1916, stated in 1921 memoir that the local Balochi tribes will regularly carry out raids against travelers in small towns. During these raids, women and children would often be abducted to become slaves and would be sold for prices varying based on quality, age, and looks. Japan. Slavery in Japan was, for most of its history, indigenous, since the export and import of slaves was restricted by Japan being a group of islands. Late in the 16th century, Japan, slavery was officially banned. Korea. Slavery was abolished with the Gabo Reform, or Gabo Reform? Gabo? Like in The Simpsons? 1894. Yeah, that was after. That was after we abolished slavery. Southeast Asia. There was a large slave class in Khmer Empire who built enduring monuments in Angkor Wat. Between the 17th and early 20th century, 1/4 to 1/3 of the population of some areas of Thailand and Burma were slaves. By the 19th century, Bhutan had developed a slave trade with Sikkim and Tibet, also enslaving British subjects and Brahmins. Not good. Not good to be a slave. Ancient Greece, Rome, Celtic tribes, Middle Ages, British Isles, Barbary pirates and Maltese corsairs, Genoa and Venice, because Italy didn't exist until the mid-1800s, Mongols, Vikings, and here you get the modern era. Portugal? Oh, that's a 15th century. That's not very modern. Spain, Netherlands, Barbary Coast, Crimean, British slave trade. They also abolished slave. Modern Europe. During World War II, Allied powers. Because forced labor, I mean, they were slaves. That's what they were. Soviet Union, of course, had their gulags. You got Hawaii prior to the 1852 Constitution of the Kingdom of Hawaii. New Zealand, had no idea. Chatham Islands, Eastern Island. And then it goes through the various abolition movements. So, lots of slavery throughout history, thousands and thousands of years. Encompasses everybody. Everybody. And when you have, here it is right here, Libyan slave trade. Yep. And it's bad. It is bad. Let's see if they got anything else here. Modern times. Contemporary slavery. Slavery in modern Africa. Slavery in the 21st century. Islamism. So, it's still going on. It's still going on. You're screaming about slavery in the United States. It's been abolished. No one has slaves here. But we do have people who are oppressed here. You want to talk about people who are under the thumb of organized crime. Yeah, They're slaves. They're essentially slaves. Not that you care, because you're not, involved in that. You're on the internet, and you don't care about the slave trade and sex slaves and all that. You should. You should, if you gave a damn about anybody but yourself. Slavery is unfortunately everywhere, and almost everybody's related to a slave in some way. You can only trace your lineage, with rare exceptions, back so far. Some people can go back hundreds of years, but most people are mutts. And when you're a mutt, that's it. You're talking going back 1,000 years in your lineage. I have my parents are from two different parts of the world. Ethnically, they're both Americans, but ethnically, their ancestry goes in two different directions. So, anybody who knows my books, I'll tell you this much, because I don't like to share a lot of personal information in these videos, but most of you know I've written a book called F.U. I'm Italian, Why We Italians Are Awesome, available on Amazon. It's a funny book about Italian heritage, so I'm Italian. At least half Italian. So I can tell you all sorts of things about Italians. I can tell you that Italians were lynched in the southern United States in the late 1800s to early 1900s. I can tell you we were put in internment camps with Japanese people during World War II. I mean, everybody's got their ancestry, and you could point to things that, hey, my ancestors were oppressed. Of course. Unless you're related to the king and queen of some country like England, where they can trace their lineage all the way back because they're an important family and they were descended from nobility. Most people have some ancestor that was a slave. Probably lots of them. When you go back 1,000 years, you're talking, let's see, 1,000 years, that would be, 1020. Okay? So let's go back 1,000 years. 1020. You're talking the Middle Ages, Vikings running around. The Roman Empire has collapsed by that time, and it's broken up into different sections. They hadn't given up slavery. The Romans had it, and they had a system, but, everybody else sort of did their own thing. And by that point in history, because of the slave trade, because you had people being conquered and then being brought into Rome to act as slaves, their DNA got mixed in with the local population, and then, more slaves and more people were born. And so... you're talking 1,000 years ago. That's a long time. You go back another 1,000 years to the year 20, pretty much at the height of the Roman Empire. That's the time, it's biblical times of Jesus. So you're talking, Rome is going everywhere. The Romans are, and this is a time before condoms. They had prostitutes and, people who just banging each other left and right whenever they can. There wasn't crimes against a lot of things. You could, if you owned a slave, you could pretty much bang them all you wanted. What were they going to do? Call the cops? So, if they had kids, you could decide to keep them or kill them or give them away. And, if you had a slave and the slave had a kid and you decided, well, I don't want a kid hanging around here. Let's just sell the baby. Or give the baby, we'll give the baby to another slave. The slave couldn't say anything. They'd probably be miserable and resent you for the rest of their life. But, that kid would maybe grow up and go on and have children of their own. And how are you going to tie those DNA ties? There's no record of that. Nobody kept records of the lineage of slaves. They weren't important. So everybody just about, especially people in America, because Americans are mutts. Americans came over here, if you were descended from a slave, you were also brought over here. Yeah, you were brought here against your will, but you were probably brought to wherever you came from against your will too. What do you want me to do? It's history. It's history. You want to go back and try to unravel all this, all these years of centuries of terrible slavery in every continent. You want to unravel that? You want to pay everybody their due? You better start with 3500 BC and go back to the Sumerians. You're going to owe the people in the Middle East a lot of money. You're definitely going to owe the Israelites a ton of cash. They built the pyramids. I mean, this is slavery. It's all slavery. It sucks. Yeah, I know it. We all know it. But, it's over for the most part. What we should be doing is joining together to stomp it out forever. But of course, you're too busy saying me, me, me. Because that's what it's really about in the comment section of YouTube. It's about me. I'm oppressed. I want you to listen to me and my opinions because I'm so woke and wonderful. Well, you're not. You're not even addressing slavery as it stands now. People in Libya are slaves. Do something about it and stop posting in YouTube.